The dust from the wagon train had barely settled when Natasha Ellsworth realized she was alone in the middle of the Texas plains with a storm bearing down on her like the wrath of God himself. She had stopped to retrieve her mother's music box that had fallen from the back of her wagon, and in those precious few moments, the caravan had pushed forward, unaware that one of their members was no longer with them. The year was 1878, and being a woman alone in these parts was dangerous enough without the addition of the black clouds rolling across the sky like an approaching army. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched the small wooden box to her chest, her full figure trembling not from the cold but from the realization that she might die out here, forgotten and alone. The wind picked up with a vengeance, whipping her brown hair across her face and sending her skirts billowing around her legs. Natasha stumbled forward, calling out desperately for the wagon train, but her voice was swallowed by the growing roar of the storm. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it felt like the earth itself was splitting open. She could barely see 10 feet in front of her as dust and debris filled the air, stinging her eyes and making it nearly impossible to breathe. Just when she thought her legs would give out, when she was ready to collapse right there on the ground and accept whatever fate the storm had planned for her, she heard it. The sound of hoofbeats pounding against the earth, getting closer and closer until a figure emerged from the chaos. He was tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders hunched against the wind, his hat pulled low over his face. Even through the storm, Natasha could make out the determined set of his jaw, the way he leaned forward as if nothing in this world could stop him from reaching her. He pulled his horse up short beside her, and without a word, reached down with one strong arm. His hand gripped hers with surprising gentleness given the desperation of the moment, and he hauled her up behind him in one smooth motion. She barely had time to wrap her arms around his waist before he was spurring the horse forward, racing against the storm that seemed intent on swallowing them both whole. "Hold on tight," he shouted over the wind, and Natasha did, pressing herself against his back and closing her eyes against the onslaught of wind and rain that had begun to fall in sheets. She could feel the power of his body as he controlled the horse, the way his muscles tensed and released with each movement. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes before he guided the horse into a shallow canyon, finding shelter beneath an overhang of rock that jutted out from the cliff face. He dismounted quickly and then helped her down, his hands steady on her waist even as the world raged around them. "You all right?" he asked, and it was the first time Natasha got a good look at him. He was younger than she had expected, probably around 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were an impossible shade of blue-green. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, giving him a roguish appearance that somehow made him even more handsome. His face was weathered by sun and wind, the face of a man who had spent his life outdoors, and there was a strength in his features that made her feel safe even in the middle of this nightmare. "I think so," she managed, her voice shaking. "Thank you. You saved my life." He shook his head, leading his horse further back under the overhang. "Do not thank me yet. We are not out of this mess. That storm is going to get worse before it gets better." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. "What were you doing out there alone? Where is your wagon train?" "They did not notice I had fallen behind," Natasha said, wrapping her arms around herself. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, she was starting to feel cold. Her dress was soaked through, clinging to her generous curves in a way that made her self-conscious. "I dropped something and stopped to pick it up. By the time I looked up, they were already too far ahead." They should have had someone watching the rear, he said, and there was anger in his voice, though she sensed it was not directed at her. That is basic trail sense. You could have been killed. He pulled off his coat and handed it to her. Here, put this on before you catch your death. Natasha took the coat gratefully, pulling it around her shoulders. It smelled like leather and smoke, and something indefinably masculine that made her stomach flutter in a way that was entirely inappropriate given their circumstances. I am Natasha Ellsworth, she said, needing to fill the silence. From Philadelphia originally, but my family was heading to Presidio, Texas to start fresh. Vincent Xavier, he replied, checking his horse for any injuries from their mad dash through the storm. I have been working cattle drives between here and Kansas for the past 6 years. Was heading south when I saw your wagon train pass. Noticed you were missing when I rode by not 10 minutes later. He turned back to her, his expression serious. You are lucky I came along when I did. I know, Natasha said softly. I owe you my life, Mr. Xavier. Vincent, he corrected. If we are going to be stuck in this storm together, we might as well use first names. He settled down against the rock wall, gesturing for her to sit beside him. We should be safe here as long as the lightning does not get too close. These storms can last for hours, though. We might be here a while. Natasha sat down beside him, pulling his coat tighter around her body. The rain was coming down so hard now that it looked like a solid gray curtain blocking out the rest of the world. How will I find my family? She asked, the reality of her situation beginning to sink in. They will not even know I am missing until they make camp tonight, and by then they could be miles away. Presidio is not that big a place, Vincent said. If they are heading there, I will make sure you find them. I promise you that. He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. I will not leave you again. Those words, spoken with such conviction, settled something in Natasha's chest that she had not even realized was unsettled. She barely knew this man, this cowboy who had risked his own life to come back for her in the middle of a dangerous storm, but she believed him. There was something about Vincent Xavier that inspired trust, a quiet strength that had nothing to do with his obvious physical capabilities and everything to do with the man himself. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside their shelter. Natasha found herself hyper-aware of Vincent's presence beside her, the way his shoulder almost touched hers, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She had never been this close to a man who was not family before, and certainly never one who made her feel the way Vincent did. It was not just gratitude, though she certainly felt that in abundance. There was something else, something that made her skin feel warm despite the cold rain and made her heart beat just a little faster. Tell me about Philadelphia, Vincent said suddenly, breaking the silence. I have never been to a big city like that. Natasha smiled, grateful for the distraction from her own confusing thoughts. It is crowded and noisy and wonderful in its own way. The streets are paved with cobblestones, and there are gas lamps on every corner. My father owned a printing press, and we had a house near Rittenhouse Square. It was a good life, but after he died last year, my mother decided we needed a fresh start somewhere new. My brother Samuel heard there were opportunities in Texas, so here we are, or here I should be at least. I am sorry about your father, Vincent said, and he sounded like he meant it. Losing a parent is hard at any age. Thank you, Natasha said. What about you? Do you have family? Vincent was quiet for a moment, his jaw tightening. My parents died when I was 15. Cholera outbreaks swept through our town in Missouri. After that, I was on my own. Worked whatever jobs I could find until I was old enough to join a cattle drive. Been doing that ever since. He looked at her. It is a hard life, but it is honest work, and I have been able to save up some money. I have been thinking about buying some land, starting my own ranch someday." "That sounds like a wonderful dream," Natasha said sincerely. "Do you know where you would want to settle?" "I have been thinking about the area around Presidio, actually," Vincent said. "The land is good there, plenty of water from the Rio Grande. It would be a good place to raise cattle, maybe even some horses." He paused. "A good place to raise a family too, I would imagine, if a man were inclined that way." Natasha felt her cheeks warm at that, though she could not explain why. She looked away, focusing on the storm outside. "I am sure you will make it happen. You seem like the kind of man who accomplishes what he sets his mind to." "I try," Vincent said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Though I have to say, saving beautiful women from storms was not on my list of things to accomplish today." Now Natasha's face was definitely burning. "Mr. Xavier," she started, but he cut her off. "Vincent," he reminded her gently, "and I am just speaking the truth, Miss Ellsworth. You are a beautiful woman, though I suspect you do not hear that often enough." "I am not," Natasha protested, suddenly uncomfortable. "I am too round, too much of everything. Men do not look at women like me that way." Vincent turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Then those men are fools. You are exactly as you should be, Natasha. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, just looked at him with her heart pounding in her chest. The moment stretched between them, charged with something she did not quite understand but felt all the way to her bones. Finally, Vincent cleared his throat and looked away, breaking the spell. "Storm sounds like it is starting to let up," he observed, and Natasha realized he was right. The rain had lessened to a steady drizzle, and the thunder was growing more distant. "We should probably wait a bit longer to make sure it passes completely, but then we will head toward Presidio. With any luck, we can catch up to your wagon train before nightfall." "And if we cannot?" Natasha asked. "Then we will make camp and find them tomorrow," Vincent said firmly. "Either way, I am not leaving you until you are safely back with your family. That is a promise." True to his word, Vincent waited until the storm had completely passed before venturing out from their shelter. The landscape had been transformed by the rain, with small streams running through gullies that had been dry before, and puddles dotting the ground everywhere they looked. The air smelled clean and fresh, scrubbed by the storm, and the sun was trying to break through the thinning clouds. Vincent helped Natasha back onto his horse, and this time she did not hesitate to wrap her arms around his waist as they set off toward the south. They rode in comfortable silence, following the tracks left by the wagon train. Vincent handled his horse with an ease that spoke of years in the saddle, guiding the animal around the worst of the muddy patches, and keeping a steady pace that ate up the miles without exhausting the horse. Natasha found herself relaxing against his back, lulled by the rhythmic movement and the warmth of his body. She had been terrified just hours ago, certain she was going to die alone in that storm, and now here she was, safe and protected by a man who had risked everything to save her. "There," Vincent said suddenly, pointing ahead. Natasha looked over his shoulder and felt relief flood through her. In the distance, she could see the white canvas tops of wagons, barely visible against the horizon. "That is them. We will have you back with your family within the hour." But as they drew closer, Natasha found herself feeling something unexpected. Instead of pure relief, there was a thread of disappointment running through her emotions. Once she was back with the wagon train, she would have no reason to stay close to Vincent. He would go his own way, continuing south on whatever business had brought him to this part of Texas, and she would likely never see him again. The thought bothered her far more than it should have, considering she had only known the man for a few hours. The wagon train had indeed stopped for the day, circling up in a defensive position as they always did when making camp. People were moving about, tending to animals and starting cook fires, when Vincent rode up with Natasha behind him. It took a moment for anyone to notice them, but when they did, there was an immediate commotion. Natasha, her mother Nora, came running from one of the wagons, her face pale with worry. "Oh, thank God! We thought we had lost you in the storm." Vincent helped Natasha down from the horse, and she ran to embrace her mother. "I am fine, Mama. I stopped to pick up the music box and the train moved on without me. If it had not been for Mr. Xavier here, I do not know what would have happened." Her brother Samuel, a tall man of 28 with their father's serious demeanor, approached Vincent and extended his hand. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," he said solemnly. "You saved my sister's life." "I did what anyone would have done," Vincent replied, shaking Samuel's hand. "I am just glad I came along when I did." "Anyone would not have done it," Samuel corrected. "Most men would not have turned back into a storm like that for someone they did not even know. You are either very brave or very foolish, Mr. Xavier, and I suspect it is the former." He glanced at the wagon master, a grizzled man named Harrison who was approaching with a scowl on his face. "Harrison, this is Vincent Xavier. He rescued Natasha after we accidentally left her behind." Harrison's scowl deepened as he looked at Natasha. "I told everyone to stay with the wagons during the storm. Why did you wander off?" "I did not wander off," Natasha said, lifting her chin. "I dropped something and stopped to retrieve it. By the time I looked up, everyone had moved on." "That is on you for not keeping up," Harrison said unsympathetically. "We cannot stop the whole train every time someone falls behind. You are lucky Mr. Xavier here found you, but this better not happen again." Vincent stepped forward, and there was steel in his voice when he spoke. "Actually, this is on you for not having someone riding drag to make sure everyone stays together. That is basic trail management, and the fact that you allowed a woman to be left behind shows poor leadership." Harrison's face flushed red. "Now you listen here, Cowboy. I have been running wagon trains for 15 years, and I do not need some drifter telling me how to do my job." "Then maybe you need to find a new job," Vincent replied coolly. "Because if this is how you operate, it is only a matter of time before someone gets hurt or killed under your watch." For a moment, Natasha thought Harrison might actually take a swing at Vincent, but Samuel stepped between them. "Gentlemen, please. We are all tired and stressed from the storm. Vincent, my family owes you everything. Please, will you stay and have supper with us? It is the least we can do." Vincent hesitated, looking at Natasha. She found herself nodding, wanting him to stay even though she knew it would only make it harder when he eventually left. "Please," she added, "let us thank you properly." "All right," Vincent agreed. "I would be honored." The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Natasha. Her mother fussed over her, making sure she was warm and dry and had not caught a chill from the storm. Samuel talked with Vincent about the trail ahead and the prospects waiting in Presidio. But through it all, Natasha found her eyes drawn back to Vincent again and again. He was so different from the men she had known in Philadelphia, so comfortable in his own skin and confident without being arrogant. He treated her mother with respect and her brother as an equal, and when he looked at Natasha, it was with an appreciation that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. After supper, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent stood to leave. "I should be going," he said. "I want to make it to Presidio by tomorrow evening and I have a ways to go yet." "You are heading to Presidio too?" Nora asked in surprise. "Then you should travel with us. It would be safer than going alone and we would enjoy the company." Vincent glanced at Natasha, something unreadable in his expression. I would not want to impose. It is not an imposition, Samuel said firmly. It is the least we can do after what you did for our family. Please, Mr. Xavier, ride with us to Presidio. In that case, Vincent said, I would be glad to. Natasha felt her heart leap at his words, even as she tried to tell herself she was being ridiculous. Vincent was just being polite, accepting her family's hospitality out of courtesy. It did not mean anything. But when she caught his eye across the campfire and saw the small smile playing at his lips, she could not help but smile back. Over the next 3 days, as the wagon train made its way slowly toward Presidio, Natasha found herself spending more and more time with Vincent. He rode beside her family's wagon during the day, telling her stories about his life on the trail and listening with genuine interest when she talked about Philadelphia and her hopes for their new life in Texas. He was easy to talk to, never making her feel foolish for her lack of knowledge about the West, and she found herself sharing things with him that she had never told anyone else. I am scared, she admitted on the second day, as they were walking beside the wagon to give the oxen a break from pulling extra weight. I know I should be excited about this new adventure, but mostly I am just terrified. What if we cannot make it work in Presidio? What if we fail? Vincent looked at her with understanding in his eyes. Fear is natural when you are facing the unknown, but you are stronger than you think, Natasha. You survived being left behind in a storm. You can survive anything Texas throws at you. Only because you came back for me, she pointed out. I came back, Vincent said quietly, but you were the one who kept going until I found you. You did not just give up and lie down in the dirt. You fought to survive. That takes strength. His words warmed her from the inside out, making her feel capable and brave. She found herself standing a little straighter, walking with more confidence. Vincent had a way of making her believe in herself, of seeing possibilities she had never considered before. On the third day, as they were setting up camp for the night, Vincent helped Samuel with the heavy work of unhitching the oxen and setting up the tent. Natasha watched him work, admiring the easy grace with which he moved and the way his muscles flexed under his shirt. She knew she should not be staring, that it was improper, but she could not seem to help herself. There was something magnetic about Vincent Xavier, something that drew her to him despite all the rules of propriety she had been raised to follow. He is a good man, her mother said quietly, coming to stand beside her, and he looks at you the way your father used to look at me. Natasha felt her cheeks heat. Mama, do not be silly. He is just being kind. I am many things, my dear, but silly is not one of them, Nora replied with a knowing smile. That man cares for you, Natasha, and unless I am very much mistaken, you care for him too. I barely know him, Natasha protested weakly. Sometimes, Nora said, you do not need a long time to know someone is special. Your father and I knew within a week of meeting that we would marry. When it is right, you just know. She patted Natasha's hand. I am not saying you should run off and marry the man tomorrow. I am just saying, do not close yourself off to the possibility of happiness because you think things should look a certain way. That night, after supper had been cleared away and most of the camp had retired to their tents and wagons, Vincent found Natasha sitting by the fire. Mind if I join you? He asked. Please do, Natasha said, moving over to make room for him on the log she was using as a seat. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance and listening to the sounds of the night around them. Finally, Vincent spoke. We should reach Presidio tomorrow by midday. I know, Natasha said, trying to keep the disappointment out of her voice. I have been thinking, Vincent continued, staring into the fire rather than looking at her. About what you said the other day about being scared of failing in a new place. Yes, the thing is, Vincent said, I have spent the last 6 years being alone, moving from place to place, never putting down roots because I was too focused on saving money and working toward this idea of someday having my own land. But these past few days with you and your family, it has made me realize that land and cattle do not mean much if you do not have anyone to share them with. Natasha's heart was beating so hard she was sure Vincent must be able to hear it. What are you saying? Vincent finally turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. I am saying that I have fallen for you, Natasha Ellsworth. I know it is crazy and too fast, and you probably think I am out of my mind, but I cannot help it. From the moment I pulled you onto my horse in that storm, I felt something I have never felt before. You are smart and brave and beautiful, and when I think about my future now, I cannot imagine it without you in it. Vincent, Natasha breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I am not asking you to give me an answer right now, Vincent said quickly. I know this is sudden and you need time to think about it, but I want you to know that I am planning to stay in Presidio. I am going to look for land to buy, start building that ranch I have been dreaming about. And if you ever decide that you might want to share that dream with me, I would be the happiest man alive. Natasha reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm from years of hard work. You think you are the only one who has been feeling this? She asked softly. Vincent, I have been terrified because I have known you for 3 days and I am already half in love with you. That is not supposed to happen. People are supposed to court for months, maybe years, before they develop real feelings. To hell with what is supposed to happen, Vincent said fiercely, squeezing her hand. I have lived my whole life doing what I was supposed to do, playing by rules that other people made. For once I want to follow my heart, consequences be damned. And my heart is telling me that you are the woman I have been waiting for my whole life. My mother said something similar earlier, Natasha admitted, about knowing when something is right. I did not believe her then, but now. She looked into Vincent's eyes, seeing her own feelings reflected back at her. I think she might have been right. Vincent reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Can I kiss you? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Instead of answering, Natasha leaned forward and closed the distance between them. His lips were warm and slightly chapped from the wind and sun, and the kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Vincent's hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer, and Natasha melted into him with a soft sigh. The kiss deepened, becoming more passionate, and Natasha felt like every nerve ending in her body was on fire. She had never been kissed before, had never even held hands with a man who was not family, but this felt right in a way she could not explain. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Vincent rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I meant what I said in that storm, he murmured. I will never leave you again, Natasha, not if you will have me. I will have you, Natasha whispered back. Today, tomorrow, for as long as you want me. That would be forever then, Vincent said, and when he kissed her again, Natasha felt like she was home. They reached Presidio the next day just as Vincent had predicted. The town was small but bustling, situated along the Rio Grande with the mountains of Mexico visible in the distance. Adobe buildings lined the main street, and there was a sense of possibility in the air, of a place still defining itself and full of opportunity for those willing to work hard. The wagon train made camp just outside of town, and families began the process of finding permanent housing and work. Samuel wasted no time in securing a small building on the main street where he planned to open a general store, using the money their father had left them. Nora busied herself with setting up a home in the rooms above the store, and it seemed like the Ellsworth family was already putting down roots. But through it all, Natasha found her thoughts straying to Vincent, who had ridden into town that morning to meet with a land agent about available property. He returned late in the afternoon, his face alight with excitement. He found Natasha helping her mother arrange furniture in their new home, and the smile he gave her made her heart skip a beat. "Can you spare Natasha for a little while, Mrs. Ellsworth?" he asked politely. "I have something I would like to show her." Nora looked between them with a knowing smile. "Of course. Just have her back before dark." Vincent took Natasha's hand and led her to where his horse was waiting. He helped her up into the saddle and then swung up behind her, wrapping one arm around her waist to keep her secure. They rode out of town heading west, following a trail that wound through scrubby mesquite and past rocky outcroppings. Finally, after about 20 minutes, they crested a small rise and Vincent pulled the horse to a stop. "There," he said, pointing. "That is it." Natasha looked out at the valley spread before them. It was not huge, maybe a few hundred acres, but it was beautiful in its own rugged way. A stream ran through the middle, lined with cottonwood trees, and there was good grazing land stretching out toward the mountains. She could see the potential in it, could imagine cattle dotting the fields and a house built near those trees. "I put down money on it today," Vincent said, his voice filled with pride and nervousness. "It is mine, or it will be once I pay off the rest. The land agent says the water rights are solid, and there is enough grass to support a decent-sized herd. It is not much yet, but it is a start." "It is perfect," Natasha said honestly, turning in the saddle to look at him. "You must be so happy." "I would be happier if you said you would help me build on it," Vincent replied. His arm tightened around her waist. "Natasha, I know we have only known each other for a few days. I know your family probably expects you to take your time, to be courted properly. But I am not a patient man when it comes to things I want, and I want you more than I have ever wanted anything in my life. Marry me, be my wife. Help me build a life here that means something." Natasha felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said, her voice catching. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Xavier." He whooped with joy, the sound echoing across the valley, and then he was kissing her again, pouring all of his happiness and hope and love into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "We should probably tell your mother," Vincent said, though he made no move to turn the horse around. "And your brother. We should do this properly." "We should," Natasha agreed, "but maybe we could stay here just a little longer. I want to enjoy this moment before we have to share it with the world." So they stayed, sitting on Vincent's horse and looking out at the land that would be their future, talking about all the plans they had. Vincent wanted to start with a small house, just a few rooms, and then expand as they needed to. He would need to buy cattle, hire some help eventually, but for the first year or two it would just be the two of them building something from nothing. Natasha found herself getting caught up in his enthusiasm, adding her own ideas about a garden near the house and maybe some chickens. "We could have children running around out here someday," Vincent said softly, "teaching them to ride, to respect the land." "Someday," Natasha agreed, resting her head against his shoulder. "But let us start with getting married first." They rode back to town as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold. When they told Nora and Samuel the news, there was a moment of shocked silence before Nora burst into tears and pulled them both into a hug. Samuel looked more skeptical, taking Vincent aside for a serious conversation about his intentions and his ability to provide for a wife. But whatever Vincent said must have satisfied him, because when they came back, Samuel was smiling and extending his hand to his soon-to-be brother-in-law. "I have never seen my sister this happy," Samuel said. "Take care of her, or you will answer to me." "I will spend every day of my life making sure she stays this happy," Vincent promised. "You have my word on that." They were married 3 weeks later in a small ceremony at the newly built Catholic church in Presidio. Natasha wore a simple white dress that her mother had made, with wildflowers woven into her hair. Vincent stood at the altar in his best clothes, his eyes never leaving Natasha's face as she walked down the aisle. When the priest pronounced them man and wife and Vincent kissed her, Natasha felt like her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held at Samuel's store, with most of the town turning out to celebrate. There was music and dancing, and Natasha found herself passed from partner to partner as was tradition, but her eyes kept finding Vincent across the room. Finally, as the sun was setting, he claimed her for a dance, pulling her close and swaying to the music. "Happy?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. "Deliriously," Natasha replied. "I keep thinking I am going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "If it is a dream, then we are both having it," Vincent said, "and I never want to wake up." They left the reception early, riding out to the ranch where Vincent had spent the past 3 weeks building a small house. It was not fancy, just 3 rooms made of adobe with a wooden roof, but it was solid and sturdy, and it was theirs. Vincent carried Natasha over the threshold, both of them laughing, and then set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, and the name sent a thrill through her. "Mrs. Xavier," Natasha repeated, testing it out. "I like the sound of that." Vincent cupped her face in his hands, his expression suddenly serious. "I love you, Natasha. I know I have said it before, but I want to say it again now that you are my wife. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love another person, and I am going to spend the rest of my life showing you that." "I love you too," Natasha whispered. "So much that it scares me sometimes." "Do not be scared," Vincent said. "I've got you and I am never letting go." He kissed her then, and the kiss was different from all the ones that had come before. It was heated and full of promise, and Natasha felt her whole body respond to it. Vincent picked her up again, carrying her to the bedroom, and Natasha went willingly, ready to start this new chapter of their life together. The next morning, Natasha woke to find Vincent already awake, propped up on one elbow and watching her with a soft expression. "Good morning, wife," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Good morning, husband," Natasha replied, stretching languidly. Through the window she could see the sun just beginning to rise, painting everything in shades of pink and orange. "What time is it?" "Early," Vincent admitted. "I am used to getting up with the sun, but you should sleep more if you want to." "I am awake now," Natasha said, sitting up and looking around the room with interest. In the dim light of the previous evening, she had not gotten a good look at it. The room was small but cozy, with a sturdy bed frame that Vincent had clearly built himself and a dresser against one wall. There were no curtains on the window yet, but Natasha was already planning what she would make. "We need to get you some cattle," she said. "A ranch is not much of a ranch without animals," Vincent laughed, pulling her back down beside him. "Always practical, my Natasha. Yes, cattle are next on the list. Samuel has agreed to front me some money to get started, which I will pay back once I sell my first herd. I am heading up to Fort Stockton next week to see about buying some young stock." "Can I come with you?" Natasha asked. "It will be a hard ride," Vincent warned. "Several days each way, camping out under the stars." "I do not care," Natasha said. "I want to be with you. Besides, someone needs to make sure you get a fair deal on those cattle." Vincent grinned at that. "You are probably right. All right then, we will go together. But first, We have a ranch to set up and a life to start building." The next few months were some of the hardest but most fulfilling of Natasha's life. She and Vincent worked from dawn until dusk, building fences, digging irrigation ditches from the stream, and preparing the land for the cattle that would arrive in the fall. Natasha had never done such physical labor before, and at first her hands blistered and her muscles ached constantly. But gradually she grew stronger, her body adapting to the demands of ranch life. She learned to rope and brand, to recognize signs of illness in animals, to read the weather and the land. Vincent was a patient teacher, never making her feel stupid when she made mistakes, always encouraging her to try again. They made the trip to Fort Stockton in late September, riding together through the vast emptiness of West Texas. At night, they camped under the stars, and Vincent taught her the names of constellations while she taught him songs her father used to sing. They made love under the open sky, with nothing but the moon as witness, and Natasha thought she had never been happier. They returned to the ranch with 20 head of young cattle, good breeding stock that would form the foundation of their herd. Vincent hired 2 men to help with the work, experienced ranch hands who knew the country and the cattle business. Natasha found herself running the household, cooking for the hands, keeping the books, and generally making sure everything ran smoothly. It was exhausting work, but it was satisfying in a way her life in Philadelphia had never been. Winter came, and with it challenges they had not anticipated. There was a hard freeze in January that killed several of their cattle, and Natasha cried over each loss while Vincent held her and reminded her that this was part of ranching, that they would recover. They did recover, breeding the surviving cattle and buying more stock in the spring. By the time their first anniversary rolled around, they had built the ranch up to nearly 50 head, and Samuel told them that they were the talk of the town, the young couple who were making a real go of it against all odds. "You did this," Vincent told Natasha on their anniversary night as they sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset. "None of this would have been possible without you." "We did this together," Natasha corrected, lacing her fingers through his. "You and me, partners in everything." "Partners," Vincent agreed, bringing her hand to his lips. "I like that." He paused, looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "I have been thinking lately about what is missing from this picture." "What do you mean?" Natasha asked. "I mean," Vincent said carefully, "that we have land and cattle and a good business. We have each other. But there is one thing we have been talking about since the beginning that we have not started working on yet." Natasha felt her cheeks warm as she realized what he was talking about. "Children." "Children," Vincent confirmed. "I want to have a family with you, Natasha. Not right away if you are not ready, but someday. I want to see our children playing in that yard, learning to ride, growing up strong and healthy." "I want that too," Natasha said softly. "I have wanted it for a while now, but I did not want to bring it up in case you thought it was too soon." "Too soon," Vincent laughed. "Natasha, we knew we were going to spend our lives together after 3 days. I do not think there is such a thing as too soon for us." That night, they made love with a new sense of purpose, both of them hoping that maybe this would be the time. And when Natasha's courses did not come the following month, and then the month after that, she began to suspect that their hopes had been answered. She waited until she was sure before telling Vincent, wanting to see his reaction when she shared the news. She found him in the barn one evening, tending to a horse that had thrown a shoe. "Vincent," she said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed excitement, "I have something to tell you." He looked up, immediately alert to the emotion in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am better than all right," Natasha said, moving closer to him. "Vincent, I am with child. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Vincent just stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Natasha had ever seen, and he let out a whoop that probably scared every animal on the ranch. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before setting her down carefully, as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he breathed, his hands going to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Natasha, this is the best news I have ever heard in my entire life." "You are happy then?" she asked, as if there could be any doubt. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Vincent said, pulling her into a kiss. "I am ecstatic. I am over the moon. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was not easy. Natasha was sick for the first 3 months, barely able to keep anything down, and Vincent hovered anxiously, trying to find foods that would not make her nauseous. As she grew bigger, the work became harder, and Vincent finally put his foot down and insisted she stop doing the heavy ranch work. Natasha chafed at the restrictions, not used to being sidelined, but she knew he was right. The baby was more important than her pride. Her mother came to stay with them a month before the baby was due, bringing with her all the supplies they would need, and a wealth of advice from her own experiences. Samuel visited regularly, bringing gifts for his future niece or nephew and marveling at how much his little sister had changed since coming to Texas. "You are happy here," he observed one day, watching as Natasha sat on the porch knitting small clothes for the baby. "Really, truly happy." "I am," Natasha agreed. "I never could have imagined this life when we left Philadelphia, but I would not trade it for anything." The baby came on a hot day in July, arriving after a long and difficult labor that left Natasha exhausted but triumphant. It was a boy, with Vincent's dark hair and Natasha's brown eyes, and when the midwife placed him in Vincent's arms, Natasha saw tears streaming down her husband's face. "He is perfect," Vincent said, his voice thick with emotion. "Natasha, you did so well. He is absolutely perfect." They named him Victor Thomas Xavier, after Vincent's father and Natasha's father, and from the moment he entered the world, he was the center of their universe. Vincent was a devoted father, getting up in the middle of the night to walk with Victor when he was fussy, changing his diapers without complaint, singing him songs in a surprisingly good voice. Natasha watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that revolved around the needs of a small baby and the demands of the ranch. They hired more help so that Natasha could focus on Victor, and the ranch continued to grow and prosper. By Victor's first birthday, they had over 100 head of cattle and were making a real profit. Vincent used some of that money to expand the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. Planning ahead, Natasha teased when she saw the extra bedrooms. "Always," Vincent replied with a grin. "I am hoping Victor will have some brothers and sisters to keep him company." "You are you?" Natasha said, moving closer to him. "And when exactly were you planning on starting work on these brothers and sisters?" Vincent's grin widened. "I was thinking maybe tonight, if you are amenable to the idea." Their daughter, Violet Rose Xavier, was born 2 years after Victor, a tiny red-faced bundle with a surprisingly loud cry. She had Natasha's curls and Vincent's blue-green eyes, and she was just as loved as her older brother. Victor was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to help take care of her, and Vincent and Natasha often found him sneaking into her room to check on her. 3 years later, their family was completed with the arrival of another son, Vernon Samuel Xavier, named after both his grandfathers. Vernon was a calm baby, the opposite of his siblings who had both been demanding infants, and he seemed content to watch the world go by with a peaceful expression. By the time Vernon was born, The ranch had grown into one of the most successful operations in the area. Vincent had built it up through hard work and smart decisions, and Natasha had been by his side every step of the way, managing the books and the household, and somehow raising 3 children in the midst of it all. They were respected members of the community, known for their fair dealings and their generosity. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Natasha by taking her back to the spot where he had first shown her the land, the place where he had proposed. The valley looked different now, dotted with cattle and fenced fields with their expanded house visible in the distance. But it was still beautiful, still full of possibility. "You remember what I said that day?" Vincent asked, holding her close as they looked out over their property. "About building a life that means something." "I remember," Natasha said. "You asked me to marry you and help you build on this land." "I did," Vincent confirmed. "And you said yes, even though it was crazy and fast and probably seemed like the most impulsive thing you could do. Do you ever regret it?" Natasha turned to look at him, cupping his face in her hands. "Not for a single second. Vincent, you gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined. You gave me love and partnership and a family and a purpose. How could I possibly regret any of that?" "I just want to make sure you know how much you mean to me," Vincent said seriously. "How much you have always meant to me. From that first day in the storm when I turned around and came back for you, I knew there was something special about you. And every day since then, you have proven me right. You are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you were left behind in that storm." "I thank God for it too," Natasha whispered, "because it brought me to you." They kissed then, a long, slow kiss that held all the love and passion of their years together. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "Come on," Vincent said, taking her hand. "We should get back before the children start wondering where we have gone." They rode back to the ranch together, Natasha sitting in front of Vincent on his horse just like she had all those years ago. But so much had changed since then. She was no longer a scared woman lost in a storm, and he was no longer a solitary cowboy with nothing but dreams. They had built something real and lasting together, something that would continue long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and triumphs. There were droughts that tested their resolve and hard winters that made them wonder if they would make it through. But they always did, leaning on each other and on the strength of their family. Victor grew into a tall, serious young man who had his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business. Violet was bright and curious, always asking questions and pushing boundaries, while Vernon was steady and dependable, the one who could always be counted on to do what needed to be done. When Victor turned 18, Vincent sat him down for a serious conversation about the future of the ranch. "This will all be yours someday," he told his son. "You and your brother and sister. Your mother and I have built this place from nothing, but it is going to be up to you to keep it going and make it even better." "I know, Pa," Victor said, "and I am ready for that responsibility. I love this land as much as you do." "I know you do," Vincent said, clapping his son on the shoulder. "I am proud of you, Victor, of all of you. You are good kids and you are going to do great things." Violet decided she wanted to be a teacher, much to everyone's surprise. She went away to study in San Antonio, coming back with newfound knowledge and a passion for education that led to her opening the first school in the area. Vernon stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father and brother, and eventually married a girl from town, a sweet young woman named Sarah who fit into the family as if she had always been there. Vincent and Natasha grew older together, their hair turning gray and their faces gaining lines, but their love never wavered. They still held hands when they walked, still stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, still looked at each other with the same wonder and affection they had felt in those early days. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting everyone they knew to celebrate. Samuel stood up to give a toast, his own hair now completely white. 20 years ago, he said, my sister met a cowboy who saved her life in a storm. At the time, I thought he was crazy for risking his life for a stranger, but I have come to understand that Vincent saw something that day that the rest of us did not. He saw his future. He saw the woman who would stand by his side and help him build an empire. He saw his partner, his love, his everything. And because he was brave enough to turn back into that storm, because he made that choice, all of this became possible. He raised his glass. To Vincent and Natasha, the best example of love and partnership I have ever known. Everyone cheered and drank, and Vincent stood to pull Natasha into his arms for a kiss. 20 years, he murmured against her lips, and I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Only 20, Natasha teased. We have at least 20 more in us, I would say. At least, Vincent agreed. They did have more than 20 more years together, in fact. They lived to see their grandchildren born, to watch Victor take over the ranch and expand it even further, to see Violet's school become a cornerstone of the community. They celebrated 40 years of marriage, then 45, and through it all, their love remained constant. On a warm evening in October, when Vincent was 72 and Natasha was 69, they sat on the porch of the house they had built together all those years ago. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and in the distance they could hear the sounds of their grandchildren playing. You remember the first time we sat on this porch? Natasha asked, her head resting on Vincent's shoulder. Our first anniversary, Vincent said. You asked me what was missing from the picture, and I said children. And now we have 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and another on the way, Natasha said with a satisfied smile. We have done well, Vincent Xavier. We have done better than well, Vincent corrected. We have built a legacy, you and I, but more than that, we have had a great love, the kind of love that people write stories about. He turned to look at her, his blue-green eyes still bright despite his age. I meant what I said in that storm all those years ago, Natasha. I will never leave you. Not in this life and not in whatever comes after. I am holding you to that, Natasha said, kissing him softly. Because I am not done with you yet. We have more grandchildren to spoil and more sunsets to watch together. Then we better get started, Vincent said, pulling her closer. We have got a lot of living left to do. And they did live, fully and completely, cherishing every moment they had together. Because they both knew that their love story had started with a storm and a choice, with a cowboy who turned back and a woman who was brave enough to trust him. Everything that came after, all the joy and the struggle and the triumph, had been built on that foundation, and it was more than either of them could have ever dreamed possible. Years later, when they were both long gone and their great-grandchildren were running the ranch that had grown into one of the largest operations in West Texas, people still told the story of Vincent and Natasha Xavier. They told it to remind themselves that true love does exist, that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected circumstances, and that a single choice, a single moment of bravery or kindness, can change everything. But if Vincent and Natasha could have heard those stories, they would have smiled and shaken their heads, because for them, it was never about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It was about showing up every day and choosing each other over and over again. It was about building something together, brick by brick and year by year. It was about keeping promises, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Vincent had promised in that storm that he would never leave Natasha again, and he had kept that promise until his last breath. And Natasha had promised to build a life with him, to be his partner in all things, and she had done exactly that. Their love story was not perfect. No love story is, but it was real and it was theirs and it was enough. More than enough. On the wall of the ranch house that still stood proud and strong decades after they built it, there hung a framed piece of paper. It was yellowed with age and the ink had faded, but the words were still legible. It was a letter that Vincent had written to Natasha on their 50th anniversary, a letter that their children had found and preserved after their parents had passed. It read, in Vincent's strong, slanting handwriting, "My dearest Natasha, 50 years ago today, I married the woman I pulled from a storm, and it has been the greatest adventure of my life. You have given me everything I never knew I needed: love, family, purpose, home. You have been my partner in every sense of the word, standing beside me through drought and plenty, through loss and triumph. When I turned back into that storm to find you, I thought I was just saving a life. I did not know I was finding mine. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being exactly who you are. I love you now and I will love you always. Your Vincent." And below it, in Natasha's neater handwriting, was her response. "My darling Vincent, you say you saved my life in that storm, but the truth is we saved each other. I gave you a family and a purpose, and you gave me courage and love and a life beyond my wildest dreams. We have built something beautiful together, something that will last long after we are gone. Our children and grandchildren will carry on what we started, but they will do it knowing that it all began with two people who were brave enough to trust in something neither of them fully understood. That is the real legacy, not the land or the cattle, but the love. Thank you for never leaving me, just like you promised. Thank you for every sunrise we watched together and every challenge we faced side by side. You are my heart, my home, my everything. Forever yours, Natasha." Those letters said everything that needed to be said about Vincent and Natasha Xavier. They loved deeply, they built faithfully, and they kept their promises. And in the end, that was the whole story. A cowboy turned back into a storm to save a woman, and in doing so, saved himself. And together, they built a love that weathered every storm that came their way, emerging stronger each time. Their great-great-grandchildren still ran the ranch, a sprawling operation that now covered thousands of acres and employed dozens of people. The original house had been expanded and renovated over the years, but the bones of it remained the same, those adobe walls that Vincent had built with his own hands still standing strong. The stream still ran through the property, lined with even more cottonwood trees than before, and cattle still grazed on the grass that Vincent and Natasha had fought so hard to preserve. On special occasions, the family would gather at the ranch, and someone would always tell the story of how it all began. They would talk about the storm and the cowboy who turned back and the curvy woman from Philadelphia who had been brave enough to trust him. They would talk about the love that built an empire and the promises that held it all together. And the children would listen wide-eyed, asking if it was all true, if love like that really existed. And the older members of the family would smile and say yes, it was all true, every word of it. Because they had seen the evidence of it in every corner of the ranch, in every decision that had been made with both business sense and heart, in every tradition that valued family above all else. Vincent and Natasha's love had not just built a ranch, it had created a way of life, a set of values that persisted through generations. The music box that Natasha had stopped to pick up on that fateful day, the one that had led to her being left behind in the storm, still existed. It sat on a shelf in the main house, carefully preserved and protected. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Someone would wind it up and let the delicate melody play, and they would think about the woman who had risked everything to save this small piece of her father's memory, and the man who had risked everything to save her. It was a reminder that the smallest decisions can have the biggest consequences, that what seems like a tragedy in the moment can actually be the beginning of something beautiful. If Natasha had not stopped for that music box, if Vincent had not turned back into that storm, none of this would have existed. All the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had been born, all the lives that had been lived on this land, all of it hinged on those few crucial moments. But more than that, it was a reminder that love is a choice. Vincent chose to turn back. Natasha chose to trust him. They both chose, over and over again through the years, to stay together and work together and build together. Love was not just a feeling they fell into and rode out passively. It was an active decision they made every single day, even when it was hard, even when they disagreed, even when circumstances tested them. That was what made their story special. Not the drama of the storm or the romance of their quick courtship, but the steadfast commitment they showed to each other year after year. They proved that true love is not just about the grand gestures, though those are nice. It is about showing up, keeping promises, and choosing your partner again and again. As the sun set over the Xavier Ranch, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors that Vincent and Natasha had watched countless times, the land seemed to hold their memory. In the rustle of the cottonwood leaves, in the lowing of the cattle, in the very earth itself, their presence remained. They had poured their lives into this place, and it had given them everything in return. Somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Vincent and Natasha Xavier were probably sitting together, watching over the legacy they had created. And they were smiling, because they knew that what they had built together would last. Not just the ranch, but the love. That was the real triumph, the real success story. They had proven that true love does exist, that it can weather any storm, and that when two people commit to each other fully and completely, there is nothing they cannot accomplish together. Their story began with a storm and a promise. I will never leave you again. And Vincent had kept that promise, not just in the immediate aftermath of the storm, but for the rest of his life. He never left Natasha, not when times were tough, not when the work was hard, not even in death, because the love they shared transcended even that final separation. She carried him with her in every memory, in every value he had taught their children, in every corner of the ranch they had built together. And Natasha kept her promises too. She had promised to be his partner, to help him build a life that meant something, and she had done exactly that. She had stood by him through everything, bringing her strength and intelligence and unwavering support to every challenge they faced. She had made the ranch as much hers as his, putting her stamp on it in ways both big and small. Together, they had created something that would outlast them both. Not just in the physical sense of land and buildings and descendants, but in the example they set. They showed everyone around them what real partnership looked like, what it meant to truly commit to another person and to a shared dream. They proved that love is not weakness but strength, that vulnerability with the right person is not something to be feared but embraced. As night fell completely over the ranch, stars began to emerge in the vast Texas sky, the same stars that Vincent had taught Natasha to identify all those years ago. The land settled into peaceful darkness, secure in the knowledge that it was well cared for, that the legacy Vincent and Natasha had started would continue for generations to come. And if you listened very carefully, on quiet nights when the wind blew just right, you might hear the echo of laughter, the sound of two people who had loved each other well and truly, who had built something beautiful together, who had proved that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that start with a storm and a choice and a promise kept. Vincent and Natasha Xavier had lived a great love, and in doing so, they had shown everyone around them what was possible when two people choose each other completely. Their story was not just theirs. It belonged to everyone who heard it and was inspired to be braver, to love more fully, to keep their promises even when it was hard. That was their real legacy. Not the land or the money or even the family, though all of those were wonderful. Their real legacy was the example they set of what love could be when it was tended carefully and protected fiercely and chosen deliberately every single day. They had started with nothing but a storm and a feeling and a handful of dreams, and they had turned it into everything. And that, in the end, was the whole story. A love that started in chaos and grew into something steady and strong and lasting. A love that weathered every storm and emerged victorious. A love that built not just a ranch but a dynasty, not just a family but a tradition of devotion and partnership that would echo through the ages. Vincent had promised he would never leave Natasha again, and he never did. Not really, because true love never leaves. It might change form, might shift from physical presence to memory to legacy, but it never truly departs. It lives on in the hearts of those who witnessed it, in the lives of those it touched, in the very land where it flourished. And so the Xavier Ranch stood as a monument to a love that refused to be forgotten, a testament to two people who had been brave enough to trust in something bigger than themselves. The story of Vincent and Natasha would be told for as long as the ranch existed, passed down from generation to generation, a reminder that true love is worth fighting for, worth risking everything for, worth building a life around. They had proved it, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one promise kept at a time. And in doing so, they had created something eternal. Not just a ranch or a family, but a love story for the ages. The kind of story that reminds us all what is possible when we are brave enough to turn back into the storm, brave enough to trust a stranger, brave enough to promise forever and mean it. Vincent and Natasha Xavier had lived that story, and in living it, they had shown the rest of us the way. They had proved that love is not just something that happens to us, but something we create through our choices and our actions and our unwavering commitment. They had built a love that would last forever, and in doing so, they had built something far more valuable than any amount of land or cattle could ever be. They had built a legacy of love, and that legacy lived on in every sunset watched from the porch of the house they built together, in every child who heard their story and believed in the possibility of true love, in every promise kept and every storm weathered. Vincent and Natasha Xavier had loved well and truly, and the world was better for it. That was the end of their story, but it was also just the beginning. Because love like theirs does not end, it transforms and continues and inspires. And somewhere on that ranch in Texas, under the vast sky that held all their memories, the love of Vincent and Natasha Xavier lived on, eternal and unbreakable, a beacon of hope for all who came after. They had proved that true love exists, that promises can be kept, and that sometimes the best things in life come from turning back into the storm instead of running away from it. And that was a lesson worth remembering, a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating for all time.